Alrighty, and we are live. How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Welcome back for our latest podcast episode of Queen's Corner. It's your boy Wardy that you know here on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, or if you're watching on our good friend Darren and the Seven Line socials, that being on their Facebook or their Twitter, then you guys know me as well here as part of the Queen's Corner pod. We're without our beloved co-host today, Anthony Recker, as Joe Sorala, as they themselves, have their typical jobs that they're still working with as well, so they weren't able to make it today, but your boy Wardy is here. So we're going to be breaking down all the latest in Mets land for everyone watching live on YouTube. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, drop comments in the live chat and replay down below. For people on socials on either my Twitter or the Seven Line socials, thank you for being in here. Make sure to hit that follow button. If you haven't already, hit that like button and drop some comments throughout the live show. But we have a lot to get into in Mets land, as today's topics are going to be highlighted by the Metropolitans winning 5 straight games thanks to a series sweep against the Cleveland Guardians. I was in attendance for game 2, so I'm going to share more of my raw reactions and analysis to being in attendance, as many of you guys saw me on the SNY broadcast right next to the SNY scoreboard. That was a lot of fun. Really grateful for the seats I had for that game. But more than anything, the production. Where the Mets gain production from on the offensive front. The baby Mets, as Francisco Lindor loves to call them, in Alvarez, Baty, Vientos. We're going to deep dive them a little bit further and get into a hot button topic right now on the Francisco Alvarez front, as I've had, the pleasure of getting in a back and forth conversation with a renowned MLB reporter out there, but I think that might be pushing things a little bit. We'll discuss that as well, and a lot more, of course, getting into the Cubs series preview and answering all your comments, questions the best we can. But more than anything, happy to have you guys all in here watching live or on replay. Really does mean a lot. For all our viewers here on socials, the same applies. Again, happy Tuesday to you all. I was about to say happy Monday, but the Mets had an off day. They deserved it after winning 5 straight and having a doubleheader, and I feel like us fans deserved it too. This has been a roller coaster of a start to the season for the Metropolitans, but thankfully, after what was a horrendous month of baseball, they are now 2 games above 500, and it's thanks to their heroics that they had not only against the Tampa Bay Rays, but now the Cleveland Guardians. And you look at this series against the Guardians, and what is the one thing that really stood out in my opinion? It was the amount of adversity that this Mets team faced each game and the ability to overcome it. It didn't matter if they were down by a couple runs earlier in the ballgame. They were going to make sure that they were able to rebound and ultimately secure the victory. And if it wasn't for guys like Francisco Alvarez at times, Brett Baty, Mark Vientos, the Mets would not have won these 5 straight games, let alone potentially even win these series. So you really have to give a tip of the cap to the kids, but we'll be deep diving them further here in the show, especially Francisco Alvarez, who, like I said, has been a big topic of discussion as of late, for good reason, and again, according to some schmucks out there in the industry, for bad reason, but we'll get into that as well. But I do got to highlight here, my biggest takeaway from the series sweep. Again, you have game 1, the Mets winning extras by a final score of 10-9. Francisco Lindor having that walk-off hit to be the late hero, but let's not forget Francisco Alvarez being the one to even get the game tied there in extras, which was so huge itself. Pete Alonso tying the ball game earlier with a grand salami with no outs off of Karinchak, who came in as a right-hand reliever there in that ballgame. I want to say it was maybe around the 7th inning, could be wrong, but the Mets just kept rallying back after in game 1, the Mets pitching and Carlos Carrasco, Leon, Nogosek, everyone and their mother tried their best to prevent the Mets from winning game 1 of that series against the Cleveland Guardians, but thankfully the bats came to play, and often. And then there in game 2, as we saw the first half of the split doubleheader, the offense was prevalent there again, and you have to give credit on the pitching front. Max Scherzer, who pitched with basically like a broken blister, if I'm not mistaken, on his thumb, throwing hand the entire time, was going through excruciating pain, still gave the Mets 6 innings of shutout ball on 86 pitches, and if he was healthy, he probably would have pitched a 7th inning there, because again, the pitch count was low. He was doing really strong, had 5 strikeouts against that Cleveland Guardians team, and really kept the Mets in that ball game. The Mets put the ball in play a lot in that game too. We saw Gary Sanchez make his Mets debut. He had a single, he had an RBI sac fly. He was productive, but what really stood out to me there in that game 1, the doubleheader, game 2, this series overall, has to be Starling Marte. Now, I know you might be saying, what about Francisco Lindor? Lindor in the nightcap, I should say, but what about the production that you got from other guys? And while that may be true, something is certain, and that was Starling Marte. Marte has not played good baseball at all. Let's see, they are going to send Alvarez down to AAA. Joel, again, you have to be smoking that Zaza to suggest such a thing, and that's why I'm going to prove you otherwise, as I've been with a lot of other people as of late. And again, if I'm proven wrong, then I'll go out and give a heartfelt apology to everyone on the Alvarez front in regards to him being sent down. But I'm going to go on a limb, and just before we get to that topic, and say that naturally when you have one of the best overall catchers in baseball right now, not only over the past couple weeks, but over the past month, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Mets are going to be hard-pressed to want to send a guy of that caliber down as soon as you have two veterans that neither of them are going to give you the type of production that you're getting from Alvarez down then to AAA. You know, again, call me crazy, I know, but we have a lot to say on that segment. But getting back to Starling Marte, this is what I really want to highlight. Shout out to you, Sean, watching on the socials too. I appreciate that. Starling Marte had a 3-hit game. He had a huge go-ahead 2-run opposite field home run after the Mets were down there in Game 2 of the series, thanks to Adam Ottavino, just absolutely getting shelled, unfortunately. And then David Robertson giving up that bomb, trying to get the 4-out save, giving up that multi-run bomb there to J-Ram. But again, I wasn't the slightest bit upset, really, with David Robertson there. He's been getting a lot of work lately, and he's been perfect for the Mets all season long. And now you have multiple runners on base. I mean, I'm not going to fault D-Rob there. That was on Ottavino. Ottavino, again, twice this past week alone, and 2 games that the Mets both won, and 2 games in which I was in attendance of, try to do his best to prevent the Mets from winning the ball game. As we go back briefly to that game against the Rays, Game 2 of this series in which I was in attendance, when the Mets thankfully had Alvarez down to the final out with a bomb to tie it, and then Alonso with a bomb in extras to win it against Tampa. Before we got there, however, the Mets tied the ball game thanks to Mark Vientos with his first home run of the year in his first game, and then Adam Ottavino gives up a bomb there to low to right, and it's a 2-run deficit for the Mets. Eventually, 3 after Negosa gives up a run not long after. So you fast forward then to this Cleveland Guardians game again. Ottavino isn't doing any help for this Mets team. He had 2 out of his last 3 outings pitching. He has given up multi-runs, and that's something that you can't see from Adam, who's supposed to be your shutdown setup guy. I know he's been worked a lot lately, but still, you need him to come up with these outs, and he wasn't able to get them. And David Robertson, again, can't follow him. But the point stands is that the Mets were down late in this ball game in the 8th inning, facing adversity. We're in the bottom of the 8th, and Starling Marte steps the hell up with that 2-run opposite field home run. That's why I have him on the thumbnail if you're watching here on YouTube or on the Seven Alliance Facebook, because Marte has not looked good for the vast majority of the season. So to see him step up now the way that he has, looking like the Marte of old, looking like the guy who's constantly getting on base, or when he's used as a pinch runner, no less, that we saw there in Game 3 after Francisco Alvarez puts the ball in play with a single. Then they bring in Starling Marte as a pinch runner. Marte goes first to third and ultimately scores the game-winning run in that 2-1 grinded out victory to get the series sweep there against the Guardians, and that nightcap with JV on the bump that we'll talk more about in a second. I mean, you have to give credit where credit's due. Marte has been a liability for this Mets team for the vast majority of the season, but finally over this past week, we're really starting to see semblance of life, and it couldn't come at a better time. You don't only have production from the kids, as we discussed, being massive factors into the Mets' victories over the past couple days, but beyond that, you're now seeing Starling Marte himself and the type of production that he's able to bring there towards the second half of the order. I mean, Marte in that 6th spot has definitely been productive, and I mean, if you can lengthen the lineup the way that Marte is now of recent, then the Mets are in good hands to have success with this offense, not only for the games to come against the Cubs, but hopefully in the weeks to months to come this regular season. So Starling Marte, I mean, again, I know he's been a liability, but I feel he definitely deserves some kudos for finally showing the light that we know and expect to see from him. If it isn't without Marte, the Mets probably don't win that Game 2 and probably don't sweep this series. So again, you have to tip the cap and be happy that he's finally getting back on a roll. So Marte, thank you for that production. Alonso, of course, has been on a heater throughout this entire stretch that we've seen as well, from Tampa to the Guardians. He's just hitting bombs galore. There's a reason why he leads the league in home runs with 17 while battling the sickness, probably the flu, a cold, whatever it was, or the past week, no less. It's like it feels like he has ice in his veins, when he is actually down and, not feeling his best physically, he's able to come out there and perform to the best of his abilities, and that's what you love to see from Polar Bear Pete, the best slugger in baseball since arriving in the league, and that is an argument, is more home runs than any other baseball player out there since arriving in the start of the 2019 season. So very happy with the offensive front that we've seen from these guys, and we're going to get on to more on the Alvarez front, because I know we're having You Trust Epler Do the Right Thing. Joel, again, we're going to get into the Alvarez topic here shortly, because again, it's a key discussion that we're going to have. I'm looking forward to it. But more than anything, I'm just very happy once more to see the Mets offensively produce the way that they have. And on the pitching front, the Mets, from their two aces, and Scherzer and Verlander got 14 innings of 1-run ball. JV won 8 innings of 1 earned run ball in that nightcap that we saw Sunday night on ESPN, no less, national TV. The Mets wearing their black jerseys on Sunday night. Why? Because they look badass. That's why, and you love to see that. But JV, after giving up a first inning bomb to J-Ram, who of course torched that thing and almost went out of Citi Field, it felt like. One of the best hitters and one of the best third basemen in baseball. Got to tip your cap there. JV got in a groove after that, and then in total with him and Scherzer, they gave the Mets 14 innings of 1 earned run ball, only allowing 1 walk, a couple hits, and 10 total strikeouts. So exactly what you could have hoped for from your two-headed monster in the rotation at a combined age of almost 80. You certainly got that in Scherzer, who, again, isn't healthy. He'll be ready for his next start, but dealing with another ailment and just bulldogged and grinded through it, as you should for a guy that's getting paid roughly $40 million a year, I'd argue. And then there with Verlander, who had his best start yet this season, looking exactly like a guy who just won the Cy Young in his age 39 season last year with the Houston Astros. So a lot to be happy about with the Mets not only sweeping the Guardians, but of course this entire stretch as a whole, winning their past 5 straight games. Now, as we get into topic 2, and again, appreciate everyone chiming in live or on replay. Happy to have you guys in here. Let's talk for a minute about the baby Mets further, as I mentioned. So you had Francisco Lindor, crediting after the Mets, of course, won the series, got the series sweep, really crediting the baby Mets, as he would call them, in Baty and Alvarez and Vientos, and being key factors into the Mets' production. And again, as I noted already, without them, the Mets don't win these consecutive games. They probably don't even win the series, as a matter of fact. The way that Francisco Alvarez especially has impacted this club, not only defensively looking sharp as ever, offensively being one of the best hitting catchers in baseball right now. He faced two scenarios already, or this past stretch of games, in which the Mets were down to their final out, and he came up clutch and drove in a run to either tie the ball game or give the Mets the lead. That is exactly what you could hope for, and then some from a 21-year-old prospect, the youngest player currently in all of baseball at the catching position especially. Alvarez has truly been a saving grace for this Mets team over this past week. He's getting more confidence by the day. He has a swagger to him. He is exactly what you would expect from what was initially a top prospect in baseball, the number 1 prospect in baseball for a year's time, just over a year ago. So Alvarez, his production has been key. Baty hit 2 home runs this past week, as did Alvarez. But Baty, you saw him hit that bomb there in the Mets' first loss to the Rays, in which he hit a bomb to right, and then hit himself a bomb, an opposite field bomb there in Game 1 against Quantrill against the Guardians, in which the Mets again ended up winning that game in extras 10-9. So Baty's looking so strong with his at-bats. Every single at-bat out there, as soon as he puts the bat to the ball, that thing looks like it is torched. The cover is torn off of it right away. His defense is looking sharp as ever, too. Baty, a guy that there were some significant concerns, some were saying, heading into the year with his defense. He shored that up and then some, and the same thing in his own right with Alvarez. Not a lot of people expected Alvarez to not only be MLB caliber, but above average defensively since being caught up, and he's been exactly that. He's been quite literally one of the best in baseball. We're going to deep dive his numbers here shortly and get into that ridiculous controversy on if he's going to be sent down or not in the near future, which I have a lot to say on. But Baty's looked great. Vientos, again, hitting a game-tying bomb in his first game as a Met this season. Have to give a huge tip of the cap to him. Again, who grew up a Mets fan, no less. You'll love to see that from Vientos, and, had 16-game stint that we saw there with the Mets last year. Didn't do much production, but this year he's shoring up his swing quite a bit. He's hitting breaking pitches a lot, and he's shoring up his swing so well that his strikeout ratio percentage went from being 30 percentile to around 15 to 16 percentile, if not 13, in his last 25 games in AAA leading up to his call-up, including 13 home runs, combining now with the Mets this year and in AAA. So Vientos, who usually is a slow starter in recent years in AAA, doesn't really get in a groove, doesn't really get too hot until you get into summertime, has really exceeded expectations on that front. The bat-to-ball skills is truly there. He's not going to be known for the glove. He will always profile best as first base / DH. He's not going to have a future with the Mets at the hot corner, because that is what Brett Baty is going to hone in and do a very good job at, because Baty's already looking strong with the defense, and Vientos just isn't, and that's okay. He will profile best as a DH, and the Mets can certainly use that type of power bat at the DH position, which is what they're now getting Vientos. Vientos, of course, had that RBI single to narrow the lead there to 1 against the Guardians, and I want to say it was that 10-9 walk-off win for the Mets as well. So Vientos, again, has a couple RBIs in his first week as a Met, being productive. And again, without these guys, you can't say that the Mets would be on the heater that they're on, because don't get me wrong, while you, of course, have a situation where you have a lot of veterans in the locker room, as you're seeing people Verlander, Lindor credit for the exact reason why they didn't hang their heads too low when they had a terrible month. It's the youth movement still at the end of the day that's bringing the constant life and the excitement into this lineup, and hopefully bouncing around with the veterans and saying, hey, let's just play free. Let's play fun. Even if we're not performing well right now, we're going to snap out of it. And when you're a hungry 21, 22, 23-year-old, the way that we know Alvarez, Vientos, and Baty are in their own right, they just want to play and they want to make the most of that opportunity, and they are surely doing that and then some. So you have to give a massive amount of credit to the kids and what they're doing for this Mets team. Who would have thought here in the middle of May, towards the end of May now, that we have 3 top prospects, and not only in this Mets lineup, but being productive and being key factors into wins on basically a night-to-night basis. You have to love that and enjoy that for what that is. And staying on the Alvarez front, as Joel, I've been going back and forth with you in the live chat. Appreciate everyone chiming in live. To my members here on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, my subscribers, new subscribers, happy to have you in here, and also everyone watching on the 7 Line socials. Boy, you must really trust Epler. He stinks. It's not a trust factor with Epler, and this is what we're going to get into on the Alvarez front. Now, I'd like to make clear, if Alvarez is somehow, some way sent down when both Nido and Narvaez return from injury, then I will give out a public apology to everyone and their mother. I had an exchange yesterday with Buster Olney, as many of you Mets fans love and know, reporter, of course, their baseball analyst for ESPN, has over 1 million followers on Twitter, yet is lucky to get around 20 likes per tweet. And the only time he gets any interaction or traction on said tweets is anytime that he gives a proper shot at the Mets that he's done so well over the past decade. For as long as I've been a Mets fan, I've had him blocked on Twitter for exactly 2 years, and unblocked him yesterday to post a graphic saying, Buster, I really want to know your opinion. Do you feel he's worthy of a demotion? Because, Buster Olney, Andy Martino, two of the same in their own right. One is covering specifically for more of a local network. The other is for mainstream, in the sense of being nationally, across the board, not only for Mets, but all baseball teams and all sports, yada, yada, yada. So Buster Olney on the night of the Mets winning their third game and third consecutive game in the series sweep, had an interesting comment, to say the least, saying that Alvarez is likely going to be sent down as soon as Nido and Narvaez return, because Alvarez still needs to work more on that defense. And, as someone who actually watches the Mets every day, I reply to him with the graphic that my great editor, shout out to Athletic Inks on Twitter, shout out to you, my man, in the past 10 games, and this is just a 10-game sample size, and I'll get into the month sample size as well, for Francisco Alvarez in 39 plate appearances, Alvarez has 2 doubles, 4 home runs, 7 RBIs, a 265 average, an over 1,000 OPS, and a 164 OPS plus. That means that he is 64% better than the average hitter in baseball over that span. If we want to go back even farther over the past month, he's still sitting around 162, 163 WRC plus, which is second best among all catchers in baseball when it comes to hitting. That is how good Francisco Alvarez has been for what has been a month straight now. Constant production. Defensively, always only in the 89th percentile in framing. If you want to go into other metrics, average exit velos in the 92 percentile, one of the hardest hitters in baseball right now. Defensively, again, he is +5 in defensive runs saved, which, if I'm not mistaken, let me double check. Shout out to Robbie for throwing this at me. Robbie Hyde, you're a beauty. With that, at least 10 innings played, he has a +5 DRS, which is third in the position, and a 3.8 FRM, again, which is fourth. So it's funny. I got into this interaction with Buster, and it wasn't one of those things that I meant for it to kind of drag on as long as it did, because I didn't think he would reply, and he did. And I got to give him credit. If you're going to stay true to a comment, he doubled down on it, and he continued to say the same thing. That it was basically, that the Mets view Nido and Narvaez as, basically impactful and are important to the team, and that's why Narvaez will send him down and give him more reps in AAA, especially defensively, when, again, if you've been paying attention at all to Alvarez, as I just listed the statistics there, he has quite literally been one of the best, not only defensive catchers in baseball, he has been one of the best overall catchers in baseball, from offensively to defensively, from the eye test to the numbers. They're all in his favor right now. So I just found that really hilarious. So I was going back and forth with him for a while, and then he went on to say, if you don't think that every team in baseball weighs salary options, then I don't know what to tell you. And it's funny because he's backtracking, because The point here is that, yes, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that every single baseball team out there in the game, that he made it on a broader scale, of course, weighs those options when figuring out what they want to do with roster management. However, those things, those factors are weighed only to such a degree when you have such a player that is producing and developing at the high rate that Alvarez is right now. Now, if Alvarez goes on a complete nosedive and becomes absolute dog you-know-what defensively and offensively over the next couple weeks to month, then okay, that's where it can be justified. But should he produce just similar caliber production, showing more life development and being a factor into Mets games on what has been a daily basis for the past 2+ weeks now, there's quite literally nothing to justify favoring him over especially Tomas Nido, in which I have nothing personal against Tomas Nido, but Nido is someone that, again, is not going to give you anything better than what Alvarez is giving you at the stop. Let's be real. Alvarez is supposed to be the future and the now for this Mets catching position for hopefully the next decade, right? Nido, at best, will always be a backup catcher in this organization. Narvaez is signed to a multi-year deal in part because he is a fellow Venezuelan, is going to be a helping hand to Alvarez, having, not only that connection with being fellow Venezuelans, but again, just getting more acclimated with the league. That's why the Mets signed him to a multi-year deal. Nido, of course, is not a guy that has any minor league options left, and he's not a guy that's going to give you any more productive value than what you're, say, getting defensively or offensively from Alvarez right now. And we know that Nido has pretty much peaked in his career for what he will be in a limited role with the Mets versus Alvarez, who at the age of 21 is leaps and bounds what we could have all initially expected when he was rushed up as a call-up thanks to Narvaez's injury. So with all those factors being said, if Nido isn't either DFA'd or traded and Alvarez is sent down while being productive, then I will go live right away. I will rant. I will call out Buck. I will call out everyone and their mother in the Mets organization for making such a foolish decision. And I feel so strongly that that will not happen because you even have, again, according to Andy Martino, who of course discussed this yesterday in a segment because they have to, naturally, when there's a hot button topic, regardless on how valid or invalid it is, that's how media works. And that's why we are discussing it as well. But he noted as well that there are multiple veterans in the locker room that would be genuinely upset and mad if Narvaez is sent down on the pitching staff. Who has been the biggest and most vocal advocate of Francisco Alvarez over the past year? Reportedly, that has been Max Scherzer. If you are on Max Scherzer's good side of all pitchers out there, and he's heavily advocating for you to get more reps, that he wants to catch you the way that we've seen Alvarez do with Max already, I mean, if that isn't a good sign, I don't know what is, right? And furthermore, Alvarez hasn't only been looking great defensively. He was catching, of course, JV, going 8 innings of 1 earned run ball the other night. He was catching Kodai Senga when he had his best start of the season, which I was in attendance for that one too. 12 strikeouts, 6 innings of 1 earned run ball. I mean, you're seeing all the life. You're seeing everything in Alvarez's favor right now. But no, because Tomas Nido has a good rapport with the pitching staff, in which 3 out of 5 of those starters are no longer part of the organization. I mean, what are we doing here, right? There's nothing to advocate for it. Alvarez is catching everybody and their mother in the rotation now. There isn't a certain bias. He's even catching Senga, which was the biggest thing that we were wondering when that was going to happen. So the fact that he's catching Senga, he's catching JV, he's caught Max, he's caught everyone. There is nothing to justify saying, oh, we got to bring Nido in because he's just our catcher for this guy and this guy. Nido, who got his eyes checked, hit a home run in AAA the other day. Again, good for him. I like Tomas Nido, and I feel bad that this is going to ultimately be the fate for him. But at the end of the day, there is truly nothing to justify unless Alvarez falls off a cliff in the next couple weeks upon Nido and Narvaez's return. There's nothing to justify sending him down, and that is the wholehearted truth. So, let's see. And they will say we signed Nido on a 2-year contract. No, that isn't going to happen. I know that they have him on a multi-year deal, but there's just, if Alvarez is continuing to impact the Mets on a day-to-day basis, again, I'm emphasizing as long as Alvarez is being productive and showing continued development, there's no way to justify this. Could the Mets maybe really consider rolling 3 catchers and give Alvarez some time, or even Narvaez rather at DH? Maybe. I mean, I don't think that's the best way to go about things, but I know that Buck and Epler are going to be hard-pressed to want to part with either catcher that's still on a multi-year contract. But Narvaez, there's a lot more money invested in him than there is Nido right now. And Narvaez really hasn't even gotten a taste with the Mets yet. And when he did, just for the couple of games, he was already producing some offense. So if I'm a betting man, I'm going with Alvarez and Narvaez as the Mets catching tandem for the foreseeable future when everyone is healthy, unless proven otherwise. And again, that's a discussion that I'm sure that we are going to have further. But just found it hilarious because Buster's whole meaning behind, why they would consider sending him down was to focus more on the defensive aspect as well, which just shows you how little knowledge he actually has of the player and hasn't watched, I don't know, his last 5-10 plus games of baseball. I know that's a lot to ask for a guy who's on salary with ESPN, but you just got to point out the obvious sometimes. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? And that's certainly the case here with Alvarez. And I truly feel strong and comfortable in saying that I will be as shocked as anyone if he is sent down anytime soon at this rate. Let's see here. Yes, and you're right. Nido did sign a new deal. That is correct. However, it is a lot less money than Narvaez is getting. I'll actually double check right now with you guys. I know it's not much, but Narvaez is actually making kind of a pretty penny. Okay, so it's a $3.7 million 2-year contract. Here's another thing. This is also the same Mets team that has eaten over $20 million of dead cap with Robinson Cano, has eaten the majority of James McCann's contract not be on the team, and yet we're worried about eating what? Not even $2 million? Like, what are we doing here? That's my further response to that. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where if this was the Wilpon era, I would wholeheartedly agree with everyone and their mother that, okay, yes, I understand this is a situation where, of course, they're not going to cut ties with him because the Wilpons just simply, they won't eat that money. Like, they're going to ride him out for as long as they can. But this is Steve Cohen. If he's willing to eat the money that he has, then he sure as shit is going to be willing to eat a little bit more of a contract. At worst, if he's DFA'd. And again, that's saying at worst if Nino's DFA'd. That's already writing off any potential of Nino being traded to somewhere that's in more desperate need of a backup catcher that likes some upside that Nino has. Because again, Nino, when right, is a really good framer in baseball. He was one of the better ones in baseball last year. Hitting wise with runners in scoring position, he was showing a lot of production there. This year, he's fell flat on his face because of his eye issue, but he's got that rectified. I'm happy for him. But the reality is that if you can trade Nino and get anything in return, then that's a positive too. The same way that the Mets, even though they ate salary, still traded McCann and got something in return. So again, just because Nino is on a multi-year contract doesn't even mean that he's necessarily going to be DFA'd. He could be dealt with. It just matters on for what. And I think for the Mets, they would pretty much be happy with whatever they're getting. You can't sit there and say, hey, I want your all-star closer. And then the other team would reply, okay, give me half your prospects. That's my final comments on that. If they send down Alvarez, that will crush his confidence. Of course it will. I mean, imagine thriving, being one of the best players in baseball at your position for weeks now, and then you're sent down because, this guy's on a multi-year deal. So it's not going to happen. Again, this is a good issue that the Mets have. When the Mets signed Narvaez, it was in part, one, because he's Venezuelan, and two, because he is, again, a veteran catcher. And the Mets didn't expect Alvarez to be ready this early in the year. Alvarez didn't look good in spring. Defensively was looking pretty sharp. Offensively wasn't doing anything. And we saw what he was doing in his first 10 games with the Mets this year. He was a strikeout machine. He was a ground ball merchant. He had no sense of the strike zone, was pressing like crazy. But this is what happens when you give a leash to a 21-year-old that was the top prospect in baseball. They're going to adjust. They're going to learn. They're going to get more acclimated. That's what we're seeing with Alvarez. It shouldn't shock anyone that now Alvarez is producing at the caliber that he is. It's great. This is exactly what you could hope for. But the most impressive thing is that he's doing it when he wasn't even initially supposed to be with the Mets at this point in the year, one. And two, he's doing it at the age of 21. There has been a productive catcher in baseball at the age of 21 in 30 years. Can we appreciate that? Seriously. So I have nothing but great things to say about Francisco Alvarez. And even when he goes into his inevitable slumps, in which he will, the defense will still be able to make up for it at the end of the day. And that has been the only thing to advocate for Nito in recent years, because it's not like he's known for a hot bat, right? So just more food for thought for people out there that may genuinely think that, Alvarez being sent down is going to happen. The only chance in hell that happens is, one, of course, if, the only way Alvarez is sent down again is if, one, he falls completely flat on his face, is having major issues, is out of it, and he's a detriment to the Mets not winning, but rather losing ball games. That's truly the only way you can justify it. Other than that, it just ain't going to happen. And even that's a stretch, because you're saying that, Alvarez has been a detriment to the Mets winning and losing ball games, but that could only be over, say, a week or two stretch. So it's okay, but he's going to get back out of that. So it's one of those things where either way it hurts the development. And this isn't something where you're focusing on, if you stop him soon, then he will be able to be eligible for a year's worth of control. He's already been up in the bigs for 45 days, so that control aspect means nothing. Again, this is Will Ponzian bullshit that people will bring up points on. It's just hilarious to hear from a guy who, again, has such a massive following and everything, but still doesn't have a clue on what's actually going on in the organization. Hence why no true Mets fan has anything positive to say on the only front over the past couple of years. And I hate feeling a certain way about some reporters out there, because there are a lot of them that I genuinely like, but I'm always going to call it out on your BS when you're doing this strictly for clicks. I mean, name me more than one or two things that Buster Olney has said in a positive light in the Mets in recent years. He purposely goes out of his way to throw specific statistics and articles that are in slight of Mets. And you knew he was doing that chop when the Braves ended up winning the division last year. Can't tell me otherwise. So that's my final comments on that entire situation. And I got the hat. Anthony, thanks for asking. I got the hat at the Mets game the other day. Yoshima, great member. Here's my take. He says, the Mets delayed bringing up the kids because they would only bring them up if there's no worry or option to send them down. If Alvarez wasn't ready, Michael Perez would have been first. Agreed. And this entire catching conversation we're having, not even mentioned Gary Sanchez, because look, Gary had a hit and an RBI the other day. That's awesome. Sanchez isn't going to be on this team for long. He's just here in the time being. If he's on this team for long, then he would have played his way into it and played into DH time. That's the only way I could see it happen. Narvaez should be starting rehab games this week, so he'll still be a little bit ways away. Nido, I don't know how long they're going to keep him in AAA, but I have a feeling that they might keep him down there for a while. Or it could be a situation, again, where maybe when the Mets bring up Nido soon, they already cut ties with Sanchez. That's possible. Either way, when both veterans are back on this roster, there isn't a chance in hell, unless until proven otherwise, that Alvarez will be set down. And again, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'll trust only when he gives the farm up. If you know, you know. Yes. Oh, my God. Are you talking about... Yeah, that was George Springer. See, again, he hasn't been right about anything. Holy shit, I forgot about that. That's a minute. Remember when we covered the George Springer sweepstakes a couple off seasons ago? In hindsight, thank goodness the Mets didn't. Springer isn't a bad hitter, but he's peaked. We know what we're getting with him. And the Mets would have shifted Nimmo to the corner, and in hindsight, that would have been the worst mistake they made, because Nimmo's one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball now. It's crazy how everything tends to work out in the end. But let's now get into the Cubs preview, guys. And D, you're kind. I appreciate that. Let's talk about this Cubs series, because this Cubs series, I think, is going to be trickier than maybe what you realize. Now, my first initial reaction to the Cubs series in Chicago was back last summer, when the Mets should have swept them, but grinded out some games. I want to say they won 2 or 3, or they split a series in Chicago. It was back and forth. The weather was very windy per usual. It was a hectic series, but no less, the Mets have Kodai Senga on the bump tonight in Chicago. First time he's playing in Chicago. And something to know with Kodai Senga, guys, is that he has dominated at Citi Field this year, has just over a 1 ERA. However, on the road has not fared nearly as well. So this is a key test for Senga here in Chicago to see what type of production, if at all, you're going to get from him today. Can he continue to bounce off of what was his most stellar start of the season against the best team in baseball at the time and the Tampa Bay Rays? Or is this something where, okay, we're going to continue to see him have struggles getting acclimated in new ballparks that he hasn't pitched in before? That is something to note heading into this start. But he's facing off against the veteran southpaw Andrew Smiley, who's off to a very solid start this series, 4-1 with a 2.86 ERA. Then in game 2, we got big drip Tyler McGill, shout out to his mama Julie, facing off against the former Met, now foe, and yes, we all agree he's a foe, and Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman is 3-4 on the year with a 3 ERA. He got rocked a start or two ago, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't even go past 2 innings against the Minnesota Twins, I'm pretty sure. But overall, Stroh's had a very sharp start to the year, and he's had a sharp campaign thus far with the Chicago Cubs. I mean, regardless on how I personally feel about Stroman and how the fan base does, there is no denying that Stroman is a talented pitcher, right? But we know how to get to him as well, and Stroh is one of those guys that if you can get to him early, you can get him out of the game pretty early. So that's going to be a key pitching matchup. The last time that Stroh faced the Mets, he did well last year, and that was in Chicago. Gave a solid start there. I think he went 5 or 6 innings against the Mets, but it was a solid start, all things considered. And then game 3, the series finale, the battle of the shit show, pardon my French. Carlos Carrasco, who's 0-2 this year with an 8.68 ERA, versus the guy that the Mets wanted so damn bad. And in hindsight, thank goodness that they didn't do it. Granted, I know it's a small sample size, but Jameson Taillon, who's a career 4 ERA pitcher, who has some good stuff, controls the strike zone very well, does not walk guys at all. Taillon, however, to start this year with the Cubs, after the Mets lost out on him, 0-3 with an 8.10 ERA. So again, similar to how the Mets really wanted a Steven Matz reunion over a year ago and that fell through, how they wanted Yusei Kikuchi and that fell through. Everything happens for a reason. They don't get Jameson Taillon. Instead, they have Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, in which Quintana should hopefully be back by early July. And yeah, if I'm a betting man, that game 3 will be the batter's box of those 3 games, right? Taillon is not looking good at all to start the year. Neither is Carrasco. Carrasco, again, retired 7 straight at one point, which you got to give him credit for in his last start. But this stuff, it's annoying with Carrasco because I'm happy to see his velo back. You're seeing life on his pitches. But a big issue with Carrasco is his stuff just isn't that good. That's the bigger issue. Like, he's not going to get you a lot of swing and miss. And he's always going to get barreled early in ball games. You know, he has a career like 8 to 10 ERA in the first inning with the Mets since arriving as a Met. Innings afterwards, he has around a 4 ERA. So still not great, but it's almost like I wonder if you had a spot starter for the first inning and then had Carrasco start in the second, if that would change anything. Or that's just one of those things where Carrasco naturally just has to get a certain feel for batters when he starts a game, no matter the inning that he begins in, and he gets off to a slow start. So, yeah, I don't know. But I will say is that there's no other way to go about it. The Mets need to win 2 out of 3 at minimum in the series. I'm not going to be hard pressed if they don't say sweep. They will have the benefit of the doubt. Cody Bellinger should. I don't believe he will be back from injury in this series. I could be wrong, but Belly being out, Dansby Swanson, who of course is a Mets killer, is a bat to look out for. Seiya Suzuki can provide that production. Patrick Wisdom has been one of the best hitters in baseball, home run wise, has really been on a roll there for the Chicago Cubs. And you know they have Trey Mancini, who of course is solid at times. They have pieces for sure, but no less, this is still a vulnerable Cubs team who has went from being hot to being not over their past couple weeks of baseball, similar to the Pirates that got to take advantage of this opportunity and try at minimum to win 2 or 3. It's a key matchup. It's exciting to see how the kids will do in Wrigley too. It's exciting to see how Alvarez, Baty, Vientos do, or lack thereof. We'll soon find out. But it's always a fun matchup when you head to Wrigley. You know, my most famous memory of Wrigley is not only, of course, the Mets murdering the Cubs in the 2015 postseason, but prior to that, after that, I should say in 2016. Was it 2016? It was 2015 or 2016. Towards the end of the regular season, Jeurys Familia had bases loaded, no out, and somehow, some way, managed to get out of that inning unscathed and continued his torturous for opposing teams, of consecutive saves and consecutive outings and not allowing an earned run. It was unbelievable. It feels like yesterday. Again, I don't know if that was 2015 towards the end or if that was it might be 2016, but was ridiculous. Again, I don't know if you guys remember that. Familia, it was bases loaded, no out for Familia, and he got out of that thing unscathed. That is not an easy thing to do. And you know how Familia is. Even Familia at his best was still a heart attack. He would get out of jams with a couple on, like an absolute freaking Houdini out here. But always enjoy watching this Mets team play out regularly, and hopefully they get themselves a series win here. And again, locking in on Kodai Senga, how he does away this time against another NL Central team. Let's not forget how he did against the Reds. What was a bad start and then really was carving up batters afterwards. Just curious to see how Kodai does and this pitching staff as a whole. But more than anything, just looking forward to it. And hopefully, if the Mets can take 2 or 3, then they would have won 7 of their last 8. Lots to be happy about in Mets land. Just get the series dub. You're not going to sweep every series. I understand that. I'm happy with the run that they've been on this far, and let's keep it going, baby. 1200, thank you so much for donations. Pucky, we trust, needs some non-AARP pitchers. Yeah, seriously. A shout out to you. Appreciate the donation. If you guys know, you know, with 1200 in the live chat. You remember that game to last year? We never do well at Wrigley in the regular season. You're right, Matthew, on Facebook. Appreciate you chiming in. Senga's got to be adjusted by now. Kodai's last start should be what we get most starts. I hope so. I really do. I'm just saying, don't be shocked if Kodai, labors a little bit today, because we have seen a difference from home and away thus far in his early tenure. Naturally, you're going to have more confidence and familiarity at home at Citi Field, which is a pitcher's park, all things considered. He's favored much better at home in his number of starts so far, and we'll see how he does here in Chicago. But if there is one last thing I want to note with you guys on the Chicago Cubs front before I get into just answering some of your comments and then getting out of here, and then of course we're going to cover the game tonight, so make sure to chime in for the post-game show, as you beauties always do. If you're watching live on YouTube, the WardyNYM post-game show that's covering the Mets every single night. But there's one player that I want to emphasize with you guys to watch for the Chicago Cubs team. That's exactly why I have him on one of my so rare MLB teams that you guys, of course, can join for a Brett Baty jersey giveaway. If you're watching here in the live chat, by clicking the link in the live chat to join the Sorare MLB league that I have for free right now, or, of course, clicking the link in the description up below of the YouTube live show, or for the comments on replay only on YouTube. Apologies to everyone on socials, but again, just check me out on YouTube to sign up for your chance to win a free Brett Baty jersey giveaway. But one of my 4 Sorare MLB fantasy teams I'm playing right now has this player, and that is a guy that's been filling in right now for Cody Bellinger being out there in center field, and that is going to be in Morel. So this guy was a rookie last year, and that is going to be Christopher Morel, I want to say. Is his first name Christopher? Yeah, Christopher Morel. And 46 at-bats this season. 370 average, 8 home runs, 14 RBIs, a 1,350 OPS. Over his past 7 games, he's batting .345 at over 1,000 OPS. He has been murdering baseballs, this kid. Only 23 years of age, basically the same age as me. And he, again, made his debut with the Cubs last year, played 113 games, had a 741 OPS, only had last year 16 home runs, and he's already halfway there from tying his mark from last year, and he's only played 11 games. He has 8 home runs in 11 games. So Christopher Morel is on an absolute heater right now, and there's going to be a guy that you're maybe have an unfamiliarity with that may torch the Mets this series. Solid chance it's going to be Christopher Morel. So lock in on him. Hopefully the Mets pitch to him appropriately, because he is having a run for the ages right now in his 11 games thus far this season. So with that being said, let's get into just answering some of your comments here in the live chat. Let's see. Just seeing what you guys got for me. Kyle Freeland. What, you're talking about pitching options? Freeland is solid. If you're talking about getting him out of Colorado. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing there, but still a little premature to get into the trade topics. We're going to be diving into that as we always do on the WardyNYM YouTube channel. That is for certain. That's literally, there's no other place to follow trade deadline coverage, trade coverage than here on WardyNYM, the #1 place for all that and then some each calendar year covering the Metropolitans. Let's see here. Just reading some of your comments. Any comments specific you guys got for me before we get out of here, make sure to drop them down below. And again, appreciate everyone that's been watching live on replay. Mets Nation, my good friend Elliot, how are you? I think the Mets is going 5-1 on this road trip. What do you think, Tyler? 5-1 on the road trip. I love that optimism. Again, happy to have you in here, Elliot. Hope you're doing well. You're an absolute beauty. Long time no see. So the Mets road trip consists of the following. So they got the Cubs, and then they got the Rockies. So I'm going to hope, wishful thinking, that out of the next 6 games the Mets play, they go 4-2. Hopefully winning both series, but dropping a game in each. That's me wishful thinking, being a little bit conservative even with the way that this team has played. The last time the Mets played the Rockies, they somehow lost 2-3, but that was also a team that had no mojo. Now they're gaining all their mojo back, and all the kids are being productive, right? So 5-1, I love it. I hope that happens. I'm going to just stay conservative like I usually do with these type of things and go 4-2 and hope to be proven otherwise. That would be awesome. Again, if the Mets can go on to winning, 9 of their last 11 games coming out of this road trip, that would be fantastic. D. Garcia says, how can we switch player cards and so we're out of 3 inactive cards? So when you enter your tournaments, if you have players that you can't switch them after the tournament started. That's the only issue, D. Garcia. So if you entered your lineups and the tournaments have already begun, your hands are tied, unfortunately. Whether that's because of someone getting hurt or they weren't lined up to pitch and you didn't realize that, that's the issue. So yeah, my apologies if that is the issue you're having. However, if you're just trying to swap cards on the website or on the app, every 24 hours you can swap 1 card on your roster that is not regardless on if they're entered in a tournament or not, you can swap your card and you can pick what position you're looking for, and they will give you a flurry of options to choose from, and you can choose whatever you deem is best. So yeah, if you already entered a tournament and your players are inactive, then unfortunately the hands are tied until that tournament is done. I'm doing great, Michael. How are you? Happy to have you in here. Anyone leave a good taste in my mouth from the Cleveland series? I'll take over for Joe. Yes, a couple players left a fantastic taste in my mouth. I mean, my goodness, my gracious. But I'm sorry, I got to go with the kid, and maybe that's even worse for me to say that he left a great taste in my mouth. But Francisco Alvarez, I mean, he has really looked good, really looked good. I just can't say enough good things about him. I can't right now. especially when after watching him perform in spring and knowing that he was going to start the year in AAA, we didn't expect this. If it wasn't for Narvaez's injury, he doesn't get this opportunity right now, right? Unless maybe Nito's faltering so bad that the Mets say, okay, we have to start to make some drastic moves, as they have. And, you have to give some credit where credit's due. I know a lot of people are not an Epler fan, and I have not been a fan of every move that Epler has made. That is for certain. However, to allow Baty, Vientos, and Alvarez to get the leash that they have right now, basically playing themselves into a position where you really can't justify sending any of them down, that is great. And I'm glad that the Mets did it as soon as they did with Baty like a month ago now, Alvarez like a month ago now, and Vientos this past week. And now it's like, all right, Ronnie Mauricio, you're the next man up. So Ronnie's doing all he can. He leads all minor league baseball, every single level of minor league baseball in hits right now. Has over 300 average, like 1,000 OPS. He's killing it. So it's a matter of when, not if, Mauricio will be sent up this year. So I'm excited to see whenever that's going to happen too. There isn't a need to bring Narvaez back. There's more of an interest, though, because you really don't know what you're getting in Narvaez, and he's on a contract in which the Mets are, between Narvaez and Nito, I would be hard-pressed to say that they would favor Nito over Narvaez. Narvaez still has more offensive upside. He's a lefty batter, too, which is appealing based on certain matchups, which I always find it appealing when you have a left-hand hitting catcher. I'm not just saying that because, I admire some that I've seen in the past, but like even Michael Perez, there's appeal to it as a left-hand hitting catcher. So I like that for sure. And I think Narvaez just brings you still more upside than what you would be getting the Nito right now. I really do. Contract aside, that's how I feel. Plus, again, he's a fellow Venezuelan, so a guy that can be comfortable and, again, continue to help Alvarez be as comfortable, calm, cool, and collected, and acclimated as he can be, and have a friend in the process more than anything. I know it might not seem like much, but having a fellow Venezuelan in that locker room that is a catcher, no less. Of course, you already have a Venezuelan there, at least one in Escobar, but the point stands, having Narvaez there, as a catcher himself that can share input and their same dialect, like those things do go a long way, adding on to the production and everything else that he can give you. Matthew on Facebook says, it was so satisfying to see Lindor silence all the haters, including Kipnis, and beat his former team twice. Yeah, no, that was great. It really was. Like, being an X factor in helping defeat Cleveland, at least 2 out of those 3 games, for sure. That was great. But, guys, with that being said, that's going to wrap up the podcast. I want to thank everyone so much that chimed in live or on replay. Usually, this is an episode that I would have went out and was live with you guys yesterday, so there's more shelf life. But we were with the expectation that it would be at least one of myself and Joe a record today, but work gets in the way. He's busy with work calls for a while today. Joe has his normal day job that he has to deal with. So there will be episodes where you see all of us together. There will be episodes where you see just myself. You'll see episodes with just Rec and me. You'll see episodes of just Joe and me. You'll even see some episodes where it's Joe and Rec without myself, but we're always going to be helping out each other when we're not all able to be available, and that was the case today. So again, thank you guys all so much for watching. That is going to do it for our latest episode of Queen's Corner podcast. We'll be keeping you guys updated. Hopefully in the near future, we'll be back on audio platform as well, because I know we had a lot of great audio listeners too during our time as we were previously going by Believe in Queens, but now we are Queen's Corner. So thank you guys all so much for watching live or on replay. Thank you for the comments, for the support. Let me know for people on replay in the comments below what is your biggest takeaway from today's live podcast episode, and I will see you guys later tonight for people watching on YouTube for our latest post-game show covering a win or loss against the Chicago Cubs. Have a great one, folks. As always, let's go Mets.